Hey guys! In today's video, we'll meet Harper Elysium, who faced death and came back with an urgent message from God. Millions of souls are at risk of going to hell. What she discovered on the other side will surprise you. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss anything. Get ready for a journey beyond life. My name is Harper Elysium, and I'm 34 years old. I was born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina, a city that many consider charming. But for me, it has always been the scene of a tumultuous life. I come from a complicated family, where love was often mixed with pain and confusion. Growing up in this environment left me with deep scars, some visible, others hidden in the folds of my soul. From an early age, I learned to deal with emotional chaos, but not always in the healthiest way. Depression became my constant companion, a shadow that followed me even on the sunniest days in Charleston. Post-traumatic stress disorder was like a horror movie replaying in my mind, bringing up memories I desperately tried to bury. To escape this suffocating reality, I found refuge where I shouldn't have, in drugs and alcohol. These substances promised temporary relief, an escape from the pain that consumed me. At first, they seemed like the perfect solution. Each sip, each dose, was like a balm for my wounded soul. But, like everything in life, this false comfort came at a high price. The years passed, and I found myself trapped in a vicious cycle of addiction and self-destruction. I tried to free myself several times, but the demons from my past always seemed stronger. When the world was hit by the pandemic in 2020, my situation drastically worsened. Lockdowns isolated me even more, amplifying my fears and anxieties. The deafening silence of isolation was filled only by the echoes of my own dark thoughts. October 2021 arrived as the culmination of all this accumulated suffering. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally. Life seemed to have lost all meaning, and I could no longer see a way out. It was in this moment of absolute despair that I made a decision that would change everything: an overdose. That fateful night, as the lights of Charleston shone outside, oblivious to my torment, I closed my eyes, hoping it would be for the last time. There was no fear, just a deep desire for all the pain to finally end. Little did I know that, instead of the end, I was about to embark on the most extraordinary journey of my existence. The first moment after the overdose is difficult to describe in earthly words. There was no smooth transition, no light at the end of the tunnel like we so often hear about. One moment, I was in my room, feeling my body giving out, and the next, I found myself immersed in absolute emptiness. This void was not just the absence of light or sound. It was the absence of everything I knew as reality. There was no ground beneath my feet, no sky above my head. There were no directions, no sense of movement. It was as if I had been stripped not only of my physical body, but of all the senses that connected me to the material world. The silence was deafening. It was not just the lack of sound, but a stillness so profound that it seemed to swallow even thoughts. I tried to scream, but there was no voice. I tried to move, but there was no body to command. It was as if I had become pure consciousness, floating in an ocean of nothingness. Time had lost all meaning in this place. I can't tell if I spent seconds or eternities in this state. There were no clocks, no familiar rhythm of breathing or heartbeat to mark the passing of moments. Each moment stretched infinitely, and at the same time, it seemed not to exist. The loneliness was overwhelming. For the first time, I understood the true meaning of the word alone. There was no one there, no family, no friends, not even the demons that had tormented me for so long. It was just me, or what was left of me, floating in this infinite void. Interestingly, the fear I expected to feel didn't come. Perhaps because fear, like all other emotions, seemed irrelevant in this state of pure existence. Or maybe it was because, after years of battling my own inner demons, this emptiness felt almost like a relief. As I remained in this state, I began to feel a dissolution of my sense of self. Who was Harper Elysium in this place where there were no names, faces, or stories. The memories of my earthly life seemed distant, like a dream that disappears when I wake up. In this void, I was no longer the traumatized girl from Charleston, nor the woman struggling with addiction. I simply was. This realization brought with it a sense of freedom that I had never experienced before. All the labels, expectations, and judgments I carried dissolved into nothingness. Little by little, I began to realize that this void, despite its apparent desolation, was not a place of punishment or torment. It was a space of infinite possibilities, a blank slate where everything could be rewritten. And it was in this moment of acceptance and surrender that I felt the first change in this seemingly unchanging environment. As he floated in that endless void, something began to change. At first, it was just a subtle sensation, as if the nothing around me had taken on a different texture. Then, gradually, I became aware of a presence. It wasn't something I could see or hear in the conventional sense, but an energy I felt with every fiber of my being. This presence was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was warm, welcoming, and above all, conveyed a love so deep and unconditional that it left me breathless. If I was still breathing in that state, it was as if love itself had taken shape and enveloped me completely. Instinctively, I recognized this presence as God, but it wasn't the God I knew from churches or religious books. He was not an authoritarian or judgmental figure. This presence was pure love, pure acceptance. There was no condemnation for my past mistakes, no disappointment for my failures. There was just a cosmic embrace that seemed to say, "You are loved just as you are." The love that emanated from this presence was so intense that, for a moment, I thought I wouldn't be able to bear it. It was as if every cell of my being was being filled with warm, golden light. All the years of pain, sadness, and self-loathing seemed to melt away in the face of this unconditional love. For the first time in my life, I felt completely accepted. There was no need to hide, to pretend to be someone I wasn't. All aspects of my existence, the good, the bad, and the ugly, were seen and loved equally by this divine presence. It was a feeling of liberation so profound that it made me cry, even though there were no physical tears. At that moment, I understood that love was the fundamental essence of the universe. Everything else, the suffering, the fear, the anger, were just temporary distortions of this eternal truth. And I, Harper Elysium, with all my mistakes and imperfections, was an integral part of this cosmic love. The presence began to communicate with me, not through words, but through impressions and feelings. He gave me profound insights into the nature of reality, the purpose of life, and my own role in the grand scheme of things. Each message was accompanied by waves of understanding and love that seemed to rewrite the fabric of my being. As I bathed in this divine energy, I felt all the wounds in my soul begin to heal. The traumas of the past, the insecurities, the fears, all of this seemed insignificant compared to the magnitude of this love. I understood that my journey on earth, with all its ups and downs, was just one chapter in a much bigger story. As I completely gave myself over to this experience, I felt like I was ready for the next step in my journey. The loving presence, which I now recognized as my true essence, began to guide me beyond the void, toward a new realm of existence. With a mixture of excitement and reverence, I allowed myself to be carried away, fully trusting in the love that enveloped me. Guided by the divine presence, I felt myself being gently pulled out of the void. The transition was smooth, like waking up from a deep dream. The nothingness around me began to dissipate, giving way to something completely new and dazzling. Suddenly, I found myself immersed in an ocean of light. It was not a static or uniform light, but a dynamic spectacle of colors and shapes that defied earthly description. Imagine the most beautiful northern lights, multiplied by 1,000 in intensity and beauty. Waves of sapphire blue light intertwined with spirals of resplendent gold. Pulses of deep violet danced with bursts of emerald green. These lights were not just visual, I could feel them. Each color, each pattern, conveyed a different sensation. Blue brought deep peace. Gold radiated wisdom, green pulsed with life and renewal. It was as if each nuance of light was a language in itself, communicating profound truths directly to my soul. There was no gravity in this realm of light, nor any feeling of heaviness. I would float or perhaps swim through this multidimensional space. My movement was not physical in the conventional sense. It was more like my intention and thought were guiding me through this cosmic sea. As I progressed, I realized that this dimension of light was alive. It was not just a static scenery, but a conscious being in itself. Every wave of light, every pulse of color, seemed to respond to my presence. It was as if the entire room was welcoming me, recognizing me as part of it. The love he had previously felt with the divine presence now seemed to permeate this entire space. Each particle of light vibrated with a frequency of unconditional love. I felt completely at home, like I had returned to a place I had always known but forgotten. As I navigated this luminous realm, I began to see glimpses of other realities. Sometimes I saw scenes from my earthly life, but from a completely new perspective. Moments that previously seemed painful or meaningless to me now revealed themselves as precious lessons, part of a greater plan. Other times, I glimpsed realities that seemed to belong to other worlds or dimensions. Crystal cities floating in rainbow skies, beings of pure energy communicating through patterns of light, universes being born and dying in eternal cycles. Each vision expanded my understanding of the cosmos and my place in it. Time, as we know it on Earth, did not exist in this place. It could have been seconds or millennia as I explored this dimension of light. Every moment was eternal, filled with wonder and discovery. As I progressed, I felt like I was being prepared for something more. The lights around me began to converge, forming a luminous path. At the end of this path, I saw something that made my being vibrate with anticipation. An imposing tower of light that rose majestically, seemingly without end. Instinctively, I knew my journey would take me to the top of this tower. With a mixture of excitement and awe, I let myself be guided towards this new stage of my extraordinary journey beyond life. As I approached the tower, its magnitude became more and more evident. It stood before me, seemingly infinite, its base plunging into the depths of the light dimension and its top disappearing into a glow so intense it was almost impossible to look at directly. The tower was not a solid structure as we know it on Earth. It was made up of overlapping layers of light, each pulsing with its own frequency and color. The lower layers had softer, more familiar tones, tranquil blues, comforting greens, welcoming pinks, but as my gaze went up, the colors became more vibrant, more intense, some of which I had never seen before and for which I have no words to describe. I felt an irresistible call to climb this tower. There were no stairs or elevators. My ascent was driven purely by intention and the desire to know more, to get closer to the source of that transcendental light. As I climbed, each layer of the tower seemed to contain lessons and revelations. In the first layer, I relived moments from my childhood, but now I saw them with a clarity and compassion I never had before. I understood my parents' imperfect but genuine love, and how their own struggles had shaped their actions. On another layer, I faced my addictions and traumas, but instead of shame or guilt, I felt a deep understanding. I saw how each challenge had been an opportunity for growth, each fall an invitation to rise stronger. As it rose, the intensity of light and love increased exponentially. It was almost unbearable, like looking directly into the sun, but at the same time, it was irresistible. Every fiber of my being yearned for more, to rise higher, to merge with that transcendental light. The upper layers of the tower contained increasingly profound revelations. In one of them, I experienced the interconnectedness of all things. For a moment, I was every person I had ever met, every animal, every plant. I felt the pain and joy of all humanity, understanding that we are all part of a greater whole. On another layer, the concept of time has completely dissolved. I saw the past, present, and future coexisting simultaneously. I understood that every choice we make creates ripples that affect not just our future, but the entire fabric of reality. The higher I climbed, the more my earthly identity dissolved. It was no longer Harper Elysium of Charleston, but a pure consciousness, a spark of divine light. The heat and intensity of the light were almost unbearable, but at the same time, I felt like I was getting closer and closer to home. Finally, I reached what appeared to be the top of the tower. The light was so intense that I couldn't make out shapes or boundaries. It was like being at the center of a star, surrounded by a love and wisdom so vast it defied comprehension. It was at this point, at the apex of the Tower of Light, that I received the most profound and disturbing revelation, a vision that would forever change my understanding of existence and the purpose of life. At the height of that transcendental experience, at the highest point of the Tower of Light, I was surprised by an abrupt change. The intense light that surrounded me began to dissipate, giving way to a vision that left me astonished and deeply disturbed. Before me, a scene of indescribable suffering unfolded. It was as if I was looking at a vast panorama of tormented souls. Millions, perhaps billions of beings, each trapped in their own bubble of agony. It was not a physical place like we imagine traditional hell, with fire and demons. It was something much more subtle and therefore much more terrifying. Every soul I saw was shrouded in a dark fog, created by their own negative thoughts and emotions. Some were stuck in endless cycles of anger, reliving moments of fury and resentment. Others were paralyzed by fear, unable to move or change. There were those consumed by guilt, constantly punishing themselves for past mistakes. And still others were lost in a sea of sadness and despair, unable to see any light or hope. The most shocking thing was to realize that no external force was imposing this suffering on these souls. There were no devils or evil entities torturing them. Each being was creating their own personal hell, trapped in a vicious cycle of negative thoughts and emotions. As I watched this devastating scene, I felt the divine presence at my side. Not with words, but through deep understanding, God explained to me what I was seeing. This hell was not a place of eternal punishment created by a vengeful divine being. It was a self-imposed emotional and spiritual state. Every soul there was moving away from divine love by choice, even if unconsciously. The suffering they experienced was the natural result of disconnecting from the source of all love and light. I then understood that hell was not a final destination, but a temporary state. Each soul had the power to free itself. Just choose love over fear, forgiveness over resentment, acceptance over denial. But making that choice often seemed impossible for those stuck in their own negative thought patterns. This revelation hit me deeply. How many times had I created my own hell on earth? How many times have I allowed myself to be consumed by anger, fear, guilt? I realized that much of the suffering I experienced in life was self-imposed, the result of my own limited choices and perceptions. At the same time, I felt an overwhelming compassion for all those souls. I wanted to reach them, show them that there was a way out, that divine love was always there, waiting to welcome them. But I understood that each person needed to make this journey for themselves. The vision of an hell slowly dissipated, but its lessons remained etched into my being. I understood that the true purpose of life was not to avoid sin for fear of punishment, but to choose love and light in each moment, no matter how difficult it may seem. When the vision ended, I found myself once again enveloped in the loving light of the divine presence. But now, that light seemed even more precious, even more vital. I understood that every moment of love, every act of kindness, every choice of forgiveness we make on earth is a light that dispels the darkness, not just for ourselves, but for all humanity. With a heavy heart, but filled with new understanding, I prepared for the next stage of my journey. I knew that whatever came next would carry with me this profound lesson about the nature of suffering and the transformative power of love. After the intense revelation about the nature of hell, I felt like I was ready for the next step in my journey. The divine presence that had accompanied me since the beginning of this extraordinary experience now invited me to a new adventure, crossing what I can only describe as a sea of light. Before me, a vast cosmic ocean stretched out, but instead of water, it was composed of waves and streams of pure light. Each wave had its own color, its own vibration, its own silent melody. It was a spectacle of indescribable beauty, one that made the most beautiful sunsets on earth seem pale in comparison. I understood without words that I needed to dive into this sea and cross it. There was no fear, just reverent curiosity and absolute trust in the divine presence guiding me. Upon entering the sea of light, the feeling was indescribable. It was as if every particle of my being was being bathed in pure love and wisdom. Each wave that passed through me seemed to take with it a layer of my earthly identity. The first wave took away all the fears and insecurities I carried. I saw memories of times when I felt inadequate or afraid of the future simply dissolve into the light. I understood that these fears were never real, just illusions created by the mind. The next wave swept away my resentments and hurts. Scenes from my life where I felt betrayed or hurt surfaced and then dissipated. I realized that those who hurt me were just acting out of their own pain and limitations. Forgiveness flowed naturally, not as an act of will, but as a recognition of the fundamental truth of our interconnectedness. Another wave washed away my earthly attachments and desires. I saw how many of the things I considered important, status, material possessions, even certain relationships, were ephemeral and ultimately insignificant in the face of the vastness of the cosmos and the eternity of the soul. As I advanced through the sea of light, I felt lighter and lighter, layers and layers of my personality, my conditioning, my limiting beliefs. All of this was gently washed away by the waves of light. It was a deconstruction process, but it wasn't painful. On the contrary, each layer removed made me feel freer, closer to my true essence. At some point, I realized that even my sense of individuality was dissolving. The idea of being Harper Elysium began to feel distant and foreign, like a role I had played in a play long ago. I realized that my true nature was much broader and deeper than any earthly identity could encompass. The last waves took with them the last vestiges of what I considered to be me. My name, my story, my memories, all of it dissolved into the sea of light. What remained was something I can only describe as pure consciousness, pure being. In this state of pure existence, stripped of all layers of human personality, I felt more alive and more real than I had ever felt before. It was as if, for the first time, I was experiencing my true nature, my eternal essence. Upon arriving on the other side of this cosmic sea, I was no longer the Harper who entered it. It was a spark of pure consciousness, a spark of divine light, and it was in this state of pure being that I prepared myself for the most profound and transformative experience of my entire journey, union with the divine. Emerging from the sea of light, stripped of all layers of my earthly identity, I found myself in a state of being that defies description in human terms. There was no longer any separation between me and the rest of the universe. The illusion of individuality had completely dissolved. It was in this state of pure consciousness that I experienced something I can only call total union with God. It was no longer an external presence guiding me, but a complete fusion. I was God, and God was me. There was no distinction. In this state of union, I experienced an ecstasy that transcends any earthly concept of happiness or pleasure. It was a deep and complete peace, a joy so intense that it seemed to fill the entire cosmos. At the same time, it was a state of absolute clarity, where all the truths of the universe seemed accessible and understandable. I realized that this unity, this state of being, is the true nature of all existence. I understood that the separation we experience in earthly life is an illusion, a dream from which we eventually wake up. Every soul, every being, every particle of the universe is, in its deepest essence, an expression of this divine unity. In this state of union, time and space lost all meaning. Past, present, and future coexisted in an eternal now. I could see the creation and dissolution of universes like waves in a vast cosmic ocean. I understood that death, which we fear so much on Earth, is just a transition, an awakening to this greater reality. I saw how all souls are interconnected, each affecting and being affected by all the others in a cosmic dance of incredible complexity and beauty. I understood that every act of kindness, every thought of love, reverberates through all of creation, as does every act of cruelty or thought of fear. In this state of unity, I experienced a love that goes beyond any human understanding. It was an unconditional, infinite love that encompassed all existence. I understood that this love is the true nature of the universe, the force that creates and sustains all life. I realized that the fundamental purpose of all existence is to experience and express this divine love in all its infinite forms and variations. Every life, every experience, every challenge, and every joy are opportunities for this love to manifest and know itself. In this state of union, all the questions I had ever asked about the meaning of life, about good and evil, about suffering and joy, found their answers, not through words or concepts, but through a direct and complete understanding of the fundamental nature of reality. I understood that each soul, on its journey through countless lifetimes and experiences, is gradually awakening to this fundamental truth of unity. Every challenge we face, every lesson we learn, takes us one step closer to that final recognition. The time I spent in this state of union felt simultaneously like an instant and an eternity. It was a state of being so complete, so perfect, that part of me never wanted to leave it. But slowly, I began to feel a gentle calling, a reminder that my journey was not yet over. With a mixture of reluctance and acceptance, I felt my consciousness beginning to separate again from this state of total unity. I knew it was time to return, to take back to the world the lessons and wisdom I had gained from this extraordinary experience. As I prepared for my return, I carried with me the unshakable certainty that this divine unity is our true nature and our ultimate destiny, and that every moment of our lives is a sacred opportunity to remember and express this fundamental truth. The transition from the state of divine union back to individual consciousness was gradual and gentle. It was like slowly waking up from a deep dream. Except the dream had been more real than any reality I had ever known. Little by little, I felt my consciousness contracting, individualizing again. The vastness of the cosmos that I had experienced began to narrow, focusing on a specific point in time and space. I realized that I was being guided back to my physical body. As I approached earthly reality, I felt a growing resistance. Part of me didn't want to leave that state of bliss and total understanding. How could I return to the limitation of physical existence after having experienced the infinity of the divine? It was at this moment that the divine presence, which I now recognized as my true essence, enveloped me once again. Without words, but with infinite love and wisdom, I was shown the purpose of my return. I saw my body lying on the floor of my apartment in Charleston. It felt so fragile, so small compared to the vastness I had experienced. But at the same time, I saw the beauty and miracle that was that body, every cell pulsing with the same divine energy that permeates the entire universe. I understood that my return was not a punishment or a demotion, but a sacred mission. Every soul that returns to life after an experience like mine has the potential to be a beacon of light, a living reminder of divine truth for those still trapped in the illusion of separation. The divine presence showed me flashes of the future, people I would meet, lives I would touch, changes I could inspire. I saw how my experience could bring hope to those who suffer, how it could help dispel the fear of death and inspire others to live with more love and compassion. As I gazed at these visions, I felt a wave of gratitude and acceptance wash over me. I understood that returning to life did not mean losing connection with the divine. Rather, it was an opportunity to bring a little of heaven to earth, to be a channel for divine love in the physical world. In this moment of acceptance, the divine presence revealed to me a final truth that resonated deeply within my being. With a voice that was simultaneously a whisper and the roar of 1,000 oceans, I heard, "I am you." These 3 simple words held such profound truth that I felt as if the entire universe had paused for a moment. I understood that there was no real separation between me and the divine, that each of us is a unique and precious expression of divine consciousness, temporarily forgotten of its true nature. With this final understanding, I felt my consciousness being gently guided back into my physical body. As I got closer, I began to feel the limitations and sensations of the material world again, the weight of gravity, the rhythm of breathing, the heartbeat. The moment my consciousness fully reconnected with my physical body, I opened my eyes. Early morning light streamed in through my apartment window, bathing everything in a golden glow that reminded me of the divine realm I had left. For a moment I lay there, letting the physical sensations gradually return. Every breath, every heartbeat felt like a miracle. Tears of gratitude and joy ran down my face as I took in the magnitude of what I had experienced. I knew my life would never be the same again, that although the challenges of earthly existence were still before me, I would face them with a new perspective, a new understanding, and a new purpose. Slowly, I sat up, my body still feeling weak from the experience of the overdose. But my spirit was stronger than ever. I looked out the window, at the city that was beginning to wake up, and smiled. Every person I saw was a reflection of the divine, every building an expression of cosmic creativity. There, in that moment of return, I made a silent promise. I vowed to live each day as a celebration of life, as an opportunity to spread the love and light I had experienced. I vowed to be a living reminder to everyone around me that we are more than our bodies, more than our daily struggles. We are, all of us, eternal expressions of divine love, temporarily forgetful of our true nature, but always on the way home. The days, weeks, and months that followed my near-death experience were a journey of rediscovery and transformation. Returning to everyday life after having glimpsed the vastness of the cosmos and experienced union with the divine was, to say the least, a unique challenge. In the first few days after my return, the world around me seemed surreal, almost like an illusion. The familiar streets of Charleston, the faces of the people, even my own reflection in the mirror, it all felt simultaneously familiar and strange. It was as if I was seeing the world through a new pair of eyes that had witnessed the true nature of reality. The most immediate and profound change was the complete dissolution of my previous addictions. The desire for drugs and alcohol simply disappeared. It wasn't a struggle of willpower, but a deep realization that these substances no longer had a place in my life. They seemed pale and insignificant compared to the experience of divine ecstasy I had experienced. My perspective on life and death has radically changed. The fear of death, which previously tormented me, especially in my darkest moments, has completely disappeared. I knew, with a certainty that went beyond faith, that death was not the end, but just a transition. This understanding brought a deep peace to my life and allowed me to live more fully in the present. My relationships have undergone a significant transformation. I saw each person as a unique expression of the divine, regardless of their actions or outward appearances. This led me to practice compassion and forgiveness that previously seemed impossible. I forgave those who had hurt me in the past, understanding that their actions were the result of their own pain and limitations. My connection with nature has deepened immensely. Every tree, every flower, every animal seemed to pulse with the same divine energy that I had experienced. I came to value long walks in Charleston's parks and beaches, feeling a deep connection to all life around me. My spiritual search took a new direction. Whereas before I had rejected all forms of spirituality due to my negative experiences, I now saw them with new eyes. I began exploring various spiritual traditions, not to find answers, but to celebrate the many ways humanity has sought to express the inexpressible. One of the biggest challenges was finding a balance between the deep understanding I had gained and the demands of everyday life. There were times when worldly concerns, bills to pay, appointments to keep, seemed trivial in comparison to the vastness of the cosmos. I learned, over time, that part of the beauty of human existence is precisely navigating between the mundane and the divine. I felt a strong calling to share my experience and help others. I began volunteering at rehabilitation centers, sharing my story with those struggling with addictions. I also began writing about my experience, hoping that my words could bring comfort and hope to those facing similar challenges to the ones I had faced. My relationship with the concept of God changed completely. It was no longer a distant, judgmental entity, but a loving presence that I was a part of. The phrase, "I am you," echoed in my mind daily, reminding me of the fundamental unity of all existence. Of course, not everything was easy upon my return. There were moments of doubt, moments when the intensity of my experience seemed to fade and I wondered if it had been real. There were days when the limitations of physical existence seemed especially frustrating. But even in these difficult moments, the memory of the unconditional love I had experienced sustained me. The biggest change, perhaps, was a constant feeling of gratitude. Every day, every breath, every human interaction has become a precious gift. I learned to find beauty and meaning in even the simplest and most seemingly mundane moments of life. Today, years after my near-death experience, I continue to unfold and integrate the lessons I learned. Each day is an opportunity to remember and live the truth I have experienced, that we are all expressions of divine love, temporarily forgotten of our true nature, but always on the way home, and each day I try to be a living reminder of this truth to everyone I meet on my path. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video, and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.